Since just after the first scene of the first episode of HBO's Game of Thrones, we've been watching Westeros squabble over the Iron Throne. Infighting and politics have played out under the shadow of something much more important, something much larger and much darker, and certainly more epic, if that can be believed. Jeor Mormont, the former Lord Commander, asked Jon, "God save us, boy. You're not blind and you're not stupid. When dead men come hunting in the night, do you think it matters who sits the Iron Throne?" At the time, we all agreed, but then went back to being enthralled by exactly that. Who's going to sit the Iron Throne? I mean, it's only fair. That's mostly what the show is focused on, but we have had glimpses and reminders of the old bear's words. But with this episode, Hardhome, we got a real reminder. The point wasn't simply argued. It was made clear and present by an extremely well-made scene. So hello again, and welcome to another episode of the History of Westeros podcast dedicated to George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire book series, as well as HBO's Game of Thrones. Of course, this is another show-only review. We will not be discussing the books at all. There should be no spoilers for book reader or for show-only watchers. And like I said, we're really excited to talk about this episode. How about you, Sean?
I am too. I also fear we might slightly break format because I have some questions that might pertain to the books.
Well, I will not. If you ask me a question that I can only answer with book spoilers, I will say so.
Okay.
So I'll answer what I can and defer to the others.
I'll be clear. I don't want to be spoiled either. I'm asking more about like stuff from the past, but I guess maybe somehow that could be spoilery too. I trust you to be careful. Right on.
Excellent. So like I said, this episode was super epic. We're gonna, of course, we feel very positive about this episode. We're really excited to discuss it, and the fandom at large seems to be largely in agreement. I have not really seen a response like this in quite a while, perhaps ever. It's really glowingly positive. People are super excited. They thought it was one of the best action scenes, maybe the best action scene the show has had, which stands in contrast to one of the worst action scenes the show has had earlier this season. The episode is rated a 9.9 on IMDb, which is absurdly high. That's an average rating, and the highest possible rating is 10. So an average of 9.9. I mean, it's one person rating it 5 drags down a whole bunch of 10s. So goes to show how popular that is.
IMDb's scale, by the way, is it's a complicated format, and they try to account for like one person rating a bunch of times. I think you have to be a member on the forum in the first place. They have a lot of like factors in their rating scale that try to stop sudden spikes. And despite that, still 9.9. So
yeah, that's really amazing. Really impressive. The director is Michael Sapochnik, who also directed the previous episode 7. He has not directed any episodes any other season. So he is somewhat new to Game of Thrones, and well, I hope they bring him back next year after how this episode went, and hopefully he's excited about returning as well. Hopefully the feeling is mutual. This is a reminder, by the way, or I want to make a reminder, by the way, that putting out this show-only episode so close to the actual airing of the episode means we can't always catch all the details. So we do rely on you all to help us out with that. You know, often things we don't actually miss, it looks like we missed. We're saving them for the book to show episode. Sometimes we do miss things, so doing 2 reviews really does help to kind of help us catch things.
Nice to have that excuse too.
Oh
yes. Yeah, we saw that. We saw that. We were just waiting for the next episode.
Yeah, we caught that. We didn't. Yeah, exactly. We were just waiting to talk about it later. Also, the book to show reviews come about 48 to 72 hours later. It does give us more time to think and reflect on it, but also it gives you all more time to think and reflect on it, which translates to our show as well being more thorough. Now, speaking of the show, History of Westeros, we have a rather important announcement to make. Next week, the episode will be broadcast live. We will have lots of links going up to direct you all to it. There should be one in the description by the time you're watching this. It should be already there. We'll certainly be tweeting the link and posting it on Facebook as well. And the plan is to start at around 4:30 Eastern Daylight Time, East Coastern U.S. that is. Hopefully that's a time that allows for people from most countries to tune in. Of course, that won't cover everybody, but there's no time of day that somebody isn't going to be a little left out. So that's the best we can do. Also, another announcement regarding the future of the show. We're going to be doing a end of the season wrap up to chat about things that we think are coming and to look at the season as a whole. Also give you, Sean, a chance to reflect on some things with a little time to think about it. I've talked about how we have to get the show out so quickly, but I get the chance to say things again in the book to show review. Everything people hear from you is just within 24 hours of hearing the show. So that'll be a different experience for everybody and for you to get to have more time to think about things.
I do a lot of times throughout the week think, I wish I'd thought of that. Wish I'd said that in the show. I pretty much, by the time the next episode is airing each week, I've completely predicted everything that's going to happen.
That's true. Now, another feature of this wrap-up episode will be more Watcher questions, which you guys have done a great job on. Now, there's a lot of great questions we haven't had time to answer, partly because of the way the show just shifts plot lines around. Sometimes people ask a great question about a plot line that isn't in the next week's episode, so we kind of hold off and wait. And then the next episode is just too busy and we don't have time, and so things get lost in the shuffle. But we've saved a lot of these questions, and we're going to answer them, a lot of them during the wrap-up. So the questions that are still relevant, the best questions. So keep that in mind, folks. Questions that you want to send us don't just have to be for a particular episode. They can be about the future of the show, more direct questions for Sean, etc. So as Game of Thrones is set to conclude its season with a bang, well, so are we here at History of Westeros. We're looking to follow in the show's coattails, so to speak. So hopefully the last two episodes are as good as this one was. So let's real quickly get started here, but first a rundown of what to expect this episode. We're gonna start in the far east, work our way west, and then north. So we're gonna start with Essos, then go to Braavos, then King's Landing, then Winterfell, then the Wall, and finish up with the epic Hardhome, which is fitting since it was the entire second half of the episode proper.
I didn't even think we were going to talk about Hardhome. I thought we were just going to focus on Winterfell.
Now, another thing about the Watcher questions for this week, we included some, but there are less than usual. I had to do some traveling last week. I attended a family funeral, and that did cut into my prep time. We do love the quality of the feedback that you all send. You guys are, I think we have a particularly intelligent group of Watchers, but which means that you guys ask good questions, which means that they deserve time and proper consideration. So we're not going to half-ass it. So we're going to save those and do them later, but we did manage to get a few of them in this time. We should have time for the trailer discussion in this episode, but if we don't, well, you understand why. It's just because there's too much to talk about. So let's get started. Less of a theme this episode. It was more action-oriented. There were fewer locations, but I'd say that the main theme was perhaps one of the main themes of Game of Thrones has been the whole time, which is this political infighting, humanity going at it with itself. Meanwhile, this ancient force is looming over everything, and that is really brought out by this episode. We see a lot of political things happening, but you got to ask yourself, are any of these things even going to matter? Are all these plans just going to be irrelevant because the White Walkers are just going to come down and just mess everything up and everyone's going to have to change all their plans? We'll see. So let's start at Essos. Dany, Tyrion, and Jorah. What did you think about this interaction? We have Tyrion kind of being asked to show his skills as an advisor right away. Dany puts him to the test immediately.
I thought that it was good. I thought that scene was pretty good. I appreciate that Dany is open-minded about this. One minor nitpick complaint, it's kind of typical of TV and film. You know, you have a sort of a climactic moment. You have these two characters destined to meet. The man walks in and his wife cheating on him, whatever it is, you know. Scene cuts. And wait, I wanted to see that. I wanted to see what was going to happen right there. I want to know what the next words out of their mouth were. And at the end of that last episode, we see Tyrion present himself as Jorah's gift to Dany. I'm Tyrion Lannister. Cut. I'm wait, hold on. What happened next? Throw him back in a dungeon and everyone was quiet until they had showers and met in the council, the Queen's chamber or whatever. I feel like there must have been some amount of dialogue before they get to this more official presentation. But, you know, for the sake of TV drama, I accept it. I was looking forward to it, you know, and I think it went interestingly. I don't know quite what I was expecting. I think we talked about it a little bit. I think that, the idea that Tyrion warned Jorah, hey, she might not be like, oh, thanks, Jorah, welcome home. Tyrion, chop his head off. It might be the other way around. Might chop your head off, Jorah, and she might accept me to her council. And
for a second there, it looked like Tyrion was going to suggest exactly that, but he wasn't so firm either way. He still kind of left it up to her.
Yeah.
But he talked her through it, and that's exactly. I thought that was pretty clever. He basically showed her. He's like, I'm not going to make the decision for you, but I'm going to talk to all the different things that need to be considered, all the considerations to show you how good I am at this. And then that's exactly what happened. She eventually decided. He kind of led her to the decision, and she took it.
A couple thoughts. One, I did appreciate in this scene and a couple other scenes, Tyrion does do a little bit more kind of analysis and thinking forward than most any other character. Most of the other characters just have this brooding, oh, never blah, 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 or maybe keep it to themselves. Like Bruce Bolton, I imagine, kind of goes through this sort of plotting in his mind, but he doesn't say it to anyone,
Yeah.
But Tyrion does. He thinks it all out, explains it. Good of Dany to give him a chance to. She cut Jorah short. She's like, I don't want to hear anything from you. But she let Tyrion talk. I wonder if or what Jorah would have said if he had been allowed to speak. I have a feeling it wouldn't have been much more than, I'm sorry, please forgive me. He probably wouldn't have had the same sort of analysis that Tyrion had. I will say one little thought I had was, I wonder how much Tyrion was telling her what she wanted to hear. I wonder on what level he understood what was going on, how much Jorah had revealed to him. Not to say it wasn't wrong or incorrect or bad advice, but I wonder how much of an angle of whatever he wanted was tainted by, what she wanted to hear. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
It makes a lot of sense. I think you might be right. I think any smart person is going to at least include a little bit of making sure their audience gets a little bit of what they want to hear. He's not trying to just be he's not trying to put her in a weird spot. He's trying to prove his worth and sweetening the situation a little bit by being more likable or by twisting things just a little bit. That I wouldn't call that dishonest. That's just, to a certain point, it becomes dishonest. No, I know you're not saying it is. I'm just saying that to a certain extent, doing that is not dishonest. But to a certain point later, it does become dishonest. It's all about.
It can be dishonest, I think if he thought decision A was clearly correct and decision B was clearly incorrect, and he tried to get her to do decision B because he thought that's what she wanted to hear. But I think that there's like decisions A through Z, and some of A, B, and C are kind of more correct than some of X, Y, and Z, but she'll go along more with D than she will with A, it's not simple in any way. And I think that Tyrion's smart enough to kind of feel out, how much he's thought ahead, what he's going to say, how much he's reading her facial expressions as he said these things. He probably had a series of if-thens, you know what I mean? Whether he was allowed to talk, what Jorah said, who else was present in the room. I don't know if he knew that Barristan Selmy was ever with her, much less that he was dead at this point, things like that. Additionally, I think it's interesting, and Tyrion said this more clearly later on, he doesn't have a lot to lose. Like, look, I already gave up on life. I don't care if you listen to me or not. You know what I mean?
Point, yeah.
I don't have some bias here where I get to be king if you don't kill me. Like, I was expected to die anyway. So that maybe gives him a little extra boldness or motivation to be honest or whatever, which maybe is what she needs. I feel like for the most part, her counsel, despite maybe being a little afraid to tell her the truth in public, don't hold back too much. You know what I mean? I think that Barristan told her, hey, look, your dad wasn't a great guy. Dario tells her, look, you're either meat or a butcher. People, I don't necessarily think she has a lacking of honesty, but maybe a lacking of forethought and analysis that Tyrion clearly is bringing. So anyway, I liked it.
Well, there's another thing that you mentioned, that Tyrion isn't aware of Barristan and all these other things, but he did touch on something by accident that I think really hit home, and the camera cut to Dany's face right at that point, which I thought was kind of sneaky. When he makes the point about, well, you can't just if you kill all the people who are devoted to you, they won't be, you won't have devoted people anymore. Well, she already did that. She killed Massador. She executed Massador earlier this season, and we talked about that a lot at the time and how that was a tough decision for her and how it was a bit of a mistake. I believe our conclusion was that she should have punished him, but not with death. She should have shown some mercy,
or at least not public beheading.
Yeah, so I think that had more of an impact than it could have had, because it was personal, and Danny didn't realize. Danny knows that he's not, like needling her for that decision. He doesn't know that happened. So it was like, ooh, yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah.
So that hit home for her, I'm sure. And there are some other good lines he had. He says, I can't remember ever seeing a sane man as devoted to anyone, and yet he betrayed you. A lot of his lines were like this, but this. And another example is, he's in love with you, but he did not trust you.
Yeah.
And ultimately, he asked the question. He also showed his value to her by asking important questions like, well, did he have a chance to confess? And she's like, yes, he had plenty of chances to confess. And so I think it's not unrealistic that he won her over so quickly, because he really did display an enormous amount of talent and proved his worth. And she knows she needs the advice, and she knows she needs help. And she just had to be sure that he wasn't, that he's not something else, that he's not he's not lying, that he isn't pretending to have skills he doesn't have, things like that.
That's a lot of times I think that characters who are making decisions or making points about a decision, they just present this one side, and it's quick and easy for the other side to say, what about da-da-da? And it even started off a little bit like that. He's like, hey, I'm the best Lannister killer. Oh, so I should welcome you to help me because you killed your family? All right, slow down, hold on.
She had some good comebacks. He's good with
Right.
his comebacks, but she had good comebacks of her own.
Yeah. And so I think, as you were saying, he's like, he loved you, but he was dishonest, or, like anything, all the points he brought up, there are things she could have said to counter. He brought up the counters also. So she could see he's thinking it through. He's not one-sided. He's not necessarily trying to save Jorah or save himself. He's analyzing the issue.
Yeah, really, she kind of showed off his own thought process. He kind of made it clear what his, how he preferred to do things.
I also appreciated, I think it was a little subtle, but when he said, he even loves you, I think, and they cut to Danny, and she seemed to be watering up a little bit. Her eyes seemed to be, I don't know on what level that was. She loved him too, or she felt extra betrayed that he would, love her and do that to her. But clearly, she's not. She could have just completely justifiably killed him in the first place. I feel like Tyrion wasn't like saying, no, you can't kill him no matter what here. He's like, I think the best call, even though it's close, is just get rid of him. And I think even that wasn't easy for her.
The whole thing makes her really emotional. Like he really is important to her, and she felt really strongly about him. I don't think she has romantic feelings for him by any means, but as a father figure, as an uncle figure, as a protector, he was the first one there for her, basically the first one to kneel to her after the dragons were born, and his devotion has been so strong that his news of his betrayal was such a shock to her. And the more you love somebody, the more their betrayal is going to hurt. And I think that's part of it. And just being reminded that he loves her or is in love with her just made the sting even harsher. And it's also more confusing for her. How can he do this if he feels that way, and et cetera. And her temper is a big part of it as well. It's harder for her to think clearly about it. Not just her temper, but all of her emotions around the situation. But her temper, of course, is always in play because she has a pretty big temper. She's Targaryen. She's got that fiery temper, right? Now, they brought back a bit of an old device when they sent Jorah out of the city. They packed a little extra punch in the scene by playing the old sad dragon music again. And then Jorah goes to look at his watch, and oh no, that's not a watch. That's more grayscale building.
I will say, throughout that whole scene, I want to say I'd forgotten, but I just was not actively thinking about the fact that he had grayscale. That was in my mind, like, I wasn't thinking, well, if he kicks her out, if Tyrion tells him da-da-da, I wasn't, kind of like thinking about what's going on, what people were thinking, what might happen. I wasn't considering in the equation the grayscale factor until he walked out, looked at us, and I was like, oh yeah, there's that part too. And
that would have made Tyrion's call easier. It's like, well, you need to get rid of him for sure. Dude has grayscale. Forget everything else. There's no way around this. That was an easy decision. But then we see he shows up with Yezan, the slave master guy, and he shows that he's still really, really devoted, wants to fight his way in front of her again. Guy just can't take no for an answer. He is really, really bent on proving himself again.
He also has little else to live for, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. He has no possessions.
There's nothing else that he really cares about in life. His father's dead, like even some idea of going back home, and that's pretty much gone, right? And he's probably going to die anyway. He'd rather die fighting in an attempt for some sort of redemption. You know, it makes a lot of sense.
Any decision he's making right now, you have to definitely consider the fact that he expects to be dead in a few years or less. That's a good point. No matter what he's doing. So it's not quite as crazy as it might seem. You know, it's hard for any of us to know what we would do with the rest of our lives if we knew for a fact that we were slowly turning to stone. So it's not really something we can put put ourselves in his place with regards. But there's some different things happen in the Tyrion and Dany one-on-one scene. There was the carryover from the Jorah scene, but the scene where she finally decides to accept him as an advisor has some interesting undertones. First of all, there's a lot of interesting similarities between Tyrion and Dany. That's kind of interesting. Both of them, their mothers died giving birth to them, which is kind of neat. There's not necessarily any deeper meaning to that, but it's kind of an interesting thing.
Does mean that neither of them have a mother figure growing up.
That is very true. Neither of them were mother. Now, of course, Dany didn't know her father either. She only has stories about him, and those stories are not so good. Tyrion did know his father quite well. And
probably wished it had only been stories.
Yeah, quite likely. And Tyrion brings up an interesting question. He suggests perhaps this is where you belong, out here in Slaver's Bay. What did you think of that suggestion?
I thought it was really interesting. I think that idea, especially watching what's happening with the show, again, I've said many times, you have this sort of squabbling over who's going to be king, while these real threats are looming, dragons in the west and zombies in the north. Maybe dragons in the west aren't even a threat, you know, like they're locked up, not under control. Dany is struggling to maintain her kingdom as it is, not a solid plan to come to Westeros anytime soon anyway. I think I said dragons in the west, I meant east. Get that straight. And here's Tyrion's even suggesting, look, you're already being a great ruler here. Why do you even want to go back there? It's crappy there anyway. Camelot is a silly place.
Yeah. I was about to do the same joke. Damn it, beat me to it.
But yeah, I still sort of expect that's where it's going. But maybe she will be showing up as a savior with her dragons to kill off all the White Walkers. I don't know. But
yeah, that's very true.
It definitely an interesting suggestion for Tyrion, and a logical one, I'll say. You know.
Yeah, and another thing that was an interesting undertone from this scene is not only do we finally get to see where this breaking the wheel speech came from, because it's something that was part of the preseason trailers. Mm-hmm. We finally see it come, but there's something missing. First of all, Tyrion breaks it down. He says, look, he shows more of his value by explaining which houses may or may not align with her. He says the Tyrells are a possibility. Everybody, Lannisters, no way. The Starks are kind of gone, etc. Fires off a few names, but he doesn't mention the Martells. He doesn't mention the Greyjoys either. And then she does her wheel speech. She doesn't mention them either. Does that mean they're potential allies or afterthoughts? Or in the Greyjoy case, it might make them afterthoughts. But Martell, we know they're not afterthoughts. They're far too deep in the game.
Yeah. To
borrow a line from The Wire, you got to account for them.
Well, a couple of things. One, I don't know how to say this without it coming off too negative or dismissive, but maybe they're not worth mentioning. They're not going to list 7. There's this house and 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 this house, and I'm going to break the wheel. They're just going to name the 2 or 3 most relevant or whatever. Also, I don't know if the Greyjoys or Martells have ever been on top either. They're a little more.
They sort of have. The Greyjoys,
stable as far as the wheels turning, they haven't shifted place and power.
Yeah.
Whereas-
the Martells were married to the royal family. I mean, Dany's older brother was married to a Martell.
True.
So that's about as on top as you can get without being actual ruling family. And none of those families have ever been the ruling family, except for the Lannisters now, sort of. But they're really the Baratheons. I mean, Tommen is still a Baratheon, but we all know that's really the Lannisters calling the shots there, and we know that Tommen is really a Lannister.
I remember I saw the character Myrcella Baratheon listed somewhere, and I was like, she's not Brett. Oh yeah. She's a Lannister. Oh, yeah. I guess technically.
In name, she is a Baratheon, yeah, but in reality, not so much. And another interesting parallel that Tyrion brings up, again, showing how useful he is and how insightful he is politically. He's like, Dany says, I'm going to break the wheel. And he says, yeah, how's it working out for you ruling without the support of the nobility? How's that going for you?
Yeah.
And she's like, Sons of the Harpy, had to impale a bunch of guys on stakes, fed a guy to a dragon. Yeah, it's not going great.
Yeah, he said, he called her terrible. She's like, I'm terrible. He's like, I've heard stories. And I remember when I was thinking how terrible was, she had that guy fed to the dragon. And I think I said it's like the worst thing anyone's done. And someone else was like, what about having 100 people nailed this thing? And like, that
story's going to spread.
Yeah.
And there's not, and that's the story that's going to spread is the 163 guys were nailed to posts. The why, the how, the who, reason behind it, the who sort of, not who they are, but who did it. That's pretty much Dany and the dudes on posts. That's pretty much all the gist of it that people are going to hear. They're not going to hear whether or not she was justified, like what the reasoning was. They're just going to be like, "Whoa, that is vicious."
People aren't going to hear all the justifications for why Tyrion killed his dad. They're just going to know Tyrion killed his dad. You know?
Yeah, and interestingly, Tyrion doesn't want to tell the story. He's like, "Well, we get to know each other better," which is, I think, that was a both accurate and smart thing to say to her. He's like, well, it's very personal. I'm not proud of it. He's kind of saying, he's like, I'm not going to brag about it. It's not something that I would, So I think that put to rest some of Dany's fear that he was just like, hey, I'm this Lannister killer. And he's like, yeah, but I know it was my family. It wasn't an easy thing to do. So I'm really curious to see how that goes. That plays out. Dany and Tyrion together is really cool. And there's a lot more potential there for future things.
For Varys showing up. That's what I'm really hoping for.
Yeah, and Tyrion's defense. What did you think about Tyrion's defense of Varys?
And hoping that he shows up welcome, right? Like, I didn't think about it too actively about how it would have gone if Varys and Tyrion show up instead of Jorah and Tyrion. Varys can win some combat and present this gift. I wonder how he would have gone about the initial meeting.
Varys would have to do like Tyrion, have to be good at talking, which he is. He would have to. So that might
just coordinating a meeting. He might have come in disguise, I suppose.
He is good at that
part
too.
Of his character, right?
So. That is very much. So I think that's all we have for Dany and Tyrion for now. Really looking forward to more of that. Looking forward to see how that goes. And see what the show does with it. So let's continue west. Let's go to Braavos. We have Arya playing the lying game. It looks like she's getting really good at it. Wouldn't you say? She's improved. I thought it was funny. The thing that she tried to lie was a geographical thing. Like, I turned down Moonsinger Lane. Smack!
I wonder.
Like, he knows where the streets are. Come on.
Well, I wonder if that was an active lie. She's trying to sneak something by her, or a mistake. If she just said the wrong name or said the wrong direction, he's like correcting. Look, you got to get your story straight. Even if you're not lying, it's still going to smack you.
I hadn't considered that. That's an interesting possibility. Now, a little just for fun, the Moonsingers are religious. There are religious leaders from Jogos Nye, which is farther east than the Dothraki Sea. Even they are so far away that they're definitely never going to have a part of the story. There's this huge, massive mountain range that separates the Dothraki Sea from where the Jogos Nye are. They're also plains type people. But when Braavos was founded, it was founded by escaped slaves, and some of these escaped slaves were Moonsingers, and the Moonsingers were particularly crucial in founding the city. So they have a special place in Braavos. So that's just kind of funny to think about, this religion from way, 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 way far away from a place that the show and the books are probably never going to deal with, other than talking about it from a distance, is an important religion here in Braavos because of its founding, which I love. That kind of detail that Game of Thrones brings out, that kind of taking the time to make this history realistic and compelling and interesting and showing how all these things work together. I love it. Anyway, Jaken's attitude I thought was kind of interesting when he's talking to the waif when she suggests that Arya's not ready, and he's kind of like, he basically says,
Yeah, what's gonna happen if she's not ready? She's gonna get killed. All right, she'll get killed. It's our God's all about death anyway, right? So what do you?
Yeah, how did you read that? You think he's kind of indifferent to her fate, or that's just his religion? That's how it works.
The flip side to that is, why are they putting so much effort in if he doesn't care?
Right.
So
that's why it's a puzzle.
Yeah, it was interesting. Maybe he's just trying to calm the waif. You know what I mean? Maybe he thinks she cares too much. You know, maybe he's pretending to care less than he does just to get her to chill out.
What is she concerned with? Is maybe she's concerned that she's gonna give away some secrets or something, like spill some Faceless Man secrets. I don't know. Yeah. But she's probably right. I mean, as she walked away, she had that big smile on her face, like, all right, I get to go do something. Yeah. I get to maybe kill somebody. It's like, that's definitely, so she's right. She's not ready to be no one. She's not ready to even maybe not be someone else. Although she does a good job of it.
I was going to say, she's not no one yet. She's just being someone else.
She's just being someone else, right. Yeah, she's not nobody. And so how about the actual scene along the wharf there? What did you think about that?
I thought it was interesting, too. It took me a second to kind of piece together what was going on. If I understand right, that guy basically he's selling life insurance.
Yeah, he's a crooked life insurance.
Right.
It's interesting that they called him a gambler. You know, I thought that made it more confusing.
Well, I thought
it is a gamble. Insurance is a gamble.
I took that to be Jaken's way of describing what he is. He's a gambler, and I don't know if the average person on the streets would call him a gambler, right? But the idea is you're gambling. The only way to lose is if the person dies. Well, if they die, they can't prove they lost. You know, so their families get screwed. So who can help them? Who can do something about this? We can do something.
Only the Faceless Men.
Right. Which again, though, I don't know. First of all, I want to say I don't know if this is like a role the Faceless Men are taking on in general as part of Bravosians. Is it institutionalized? Shouldn't that guy know better if that's the case? It makes it seem more like someone has come to them with this issue and they're deciding to take it on. And so he's assigning Arya to deal with this. And maybe that's why Arya is not ready, is because she is a little more reveling in the idea of exacting revenge than in just doing this nameless mission as, you know.
And I think they really telegraphed how the murder is going to go down. Did you pick up on that?
I assume she's going to get him poisoned in the vinegar.
Exactly. That they really kind of spelled that out. They show the vinegar, pouring is like, and then he asked for vinegar, and you're like, Then he gives him this vial liquid. It's like, well, that's pretty right. And he orders 4 of them, so she's even got time to, you know, like, I don't know, get away, she turns her back too when she's pouring the vinegar. So it's all just, everything's right there. It's all set up. So that could mean that it doesn't go the way we expect because it's so straightforward. But it also could go exactly the way we think it will.
But you can also see why she has to become someone else and why she can't mess up on a street name. She really has to be this girl. You know what I mean?
Yes, she does.
And I sort of took it to be that she didn't just make this story up, that she actually went out there every day and made herself known to the community and spread her story. Everyone knows who she is. She really is someone else now. She really did save up money and buy another car. I could be wrong, but I'm taking weeks to have gone by here.
Oh, definitely. Like she talks about how her route is the first thing I do is I meet to see this girl Lara every day, and she buys 4 or 6 clams and moves on. So that's the way they showed it. Those two knew each other. They recognize each other. So yeah, you're right. It's definitely been a while. So
if she was ever questioned, she can't say the wrong street name, or it'll be more suspicious. Someone will think she's lying, even if she makes a mistake. Even if she's not actively telling a lie, she can't make mistakes of truth either.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I don't think that it was a brief glimpse. I think this whole scene. There's not maybe it's a little Arya. We kind of get these. Arya hasn't been in a lot of episodes this season, but when we get these scenes, they're very compelling, but they're still kind of moving us along a little bit gradually, which makes sense because she's still a relatively young girl. She's learning to be something incredible from what it looks like. From what we've seen Jaqen do, we've seen the powers of the Faceless Men. She's learning something really important and major and difficult. So it would be silly for it to be over quickly.
Suddenly
learn it all. But What did you have any more expectations for this plotline? Do you have any other kind of predictions, or what do you anything you can see about going forward?
Well, things I've mentioned before. I wonder how it plays into the overarching storyline of zombies in the north and dragons in the east.
It's kind of hard to see how she fits into that, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the closest connection I've got is that Meryn Trant and Mace Tyrell just went to Braavos, and the Braavos Bank is concerned about the Lannisters' money they owe them, and Stannis is indebted to them now. So
and Meryn Trant's on her list.
And Meryn, right? Yeah. So I can't see connections, but it seems pretty down the road before they come tied together. But
and killing Meryn Trant would be something that Arya would do. That's not something that no one would do.
Right. So whether she'll continue on this path to be a faceless one, or whether or not the path on a faceless one will coincide with the path that Arya would have had anyway.
So maybe she'll just get partial training and then just kind of go off on her. She'll be some hybrid northern girl with some faceless man abilities, with her own sword because she stashed it away. Presumably she'll retrieve it at some point.
Yeah.
Maybe not, but I would think so.
And maybe that's even part of what the waif is worried about, that she'll get a certain degree of training and then abandon, and they're wasting their time with her.
And they created an element to their
created a monster,
right?
Yeah,
and that's what they would have. Yeah, from their beliefs, she's. It's not their job to decide who dies. The many-faced god decides. They're facilitators. They don't seek revenge. Other people come to them seeking revenge, and if their cause is worthy, so to speak, then they get taken up. That's something that isn't fully. That's something that I will. This isn't a book spoiler, but I'll state that the logic behind everything and how the faceless men work and how people petition them is explained a little bit more thoroughly. And it's not too late for them to explain it a little more thoroughly in the show, but it looks like they've kind of moved past that and just given us a few of the broader strokes and focused more on Arya's character and development rather than how it all works. They may have even talked about some of it in one of those behind the scenes, or maybe in one of the Blu-ray history and lore videos. They talk about it a bit more in depth. So there's that. Okay, any more on Arya and the Faceless Men? Should we move on?
Yep.
Okay, let's go to King's Landing. King's Landing, Cersei and Septa Unella, who I had been referring to as Super Septa. I wasn't sure that was still her. She doesn't look quite as big, but that's because we keep seeing it from the angle of Cersei sitting down, and everyone looks huge when you're sitting down, I suppose. But I checked the credits. That is the same person, according to IMDb. Unella is kind of nasty, isn't she? She's not just trying to make her confess. She's kind of playing back and forth with Cersei. She smacked her with the spoon, poured the water, like kind of mean. What did you think about these interactions in general and about Cersei's position?
A little torn because, partly you feel like Cersei just deserves whatever she gets, but on some level,
I feel like there.
Yeah. On some level, I feel like the Septa, the Church, the Sparrow, the powers that be, want justice served, want truth found. They're serving the seven gods. It doesn't seem like it is or should be her role to punish Cersei. She hasn't even had a trial yet, right? And even if she genuinely wants a confession, this just isn't the way to do it. It's a meaningless confession, even if she gave it. First of all, what does she expect? She's like, oh, you're thirsty? Confess. Does she expect, okay, I did it. Please let me have some water now. You know what I mean? Even if Cersei believes she would get water or whatever else from it, it doesn't make sense to treat someone this way, to me. Unless you just want to be mean. And someone who just wants to be mean doesn't seem like they'd be in this position in the church, So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm not sure. Maybe she'll get her own. You know what I mean? Maybe she doesn't deserve her position. Maybe the Sparrow will chastise her. Maybe the Sparrow told her, get a confession, however, Cersei doesn't deserve any mercy. I'm not sure. But generally speaking, other than seeing Cersei punish, I don't like it. And at least part of why I don't like it is because it doesn't quite make sense to me.
She looked pretty bad in there, didn't she?
Yeah.
Pretty torn up, like her legs were a mess. Her hair is all ratty. Kind of like Marjorie. Kind of looked like Marjorie did. Don't know how Marjorie's doing right now.
Yeah, I wonder if Marjorie's also having confessions demanded and smacked on the head and being deprived of water,
Quite possibly. Sure. Marjorie's only accused of perjury at this point. It's not nearly as bad as Cersei's accused of incest,
adultery,
perjury, adultery, and murdering the king.
Yeah.
There are lots of more serious crimes. Now,
Marjorie even maybe has some level of defense or understanding towards, I was trying to protect my brother. What do you want from me? You know?
Yeah, that's true. It doesn't seem, if they both face the maximum penalty for their crimes, you would expect Cersei's punishment to be far worse than Marjorie's. Probably far, far worse than Loras's, too. At least I hope so. I hope the 7-pointed star doesn't have buggery up there with murdering the king. This is an equal crime. Like, please, come on. That's a bit much. Now, we also get a scene with Qyburn coming in to talk to Cersei. So we see maybe someone who is at least still loyal to her. Makes sense. It seems unlikely that anyone else would have put Qyburn on that position. You know, like no one else would have probably elected him to be Master of Whisperers. It doesn't seem like Tommen wouldn't have done that on his own. Robert wouldn't have done that. Pycelle was against him. Pretty much everybody hates Qyburn except Cersei. They're all kind of creeped out by him and respect the Citadel's decision to strip him of his chain was probably the correct thing. But Cersei, of course, is a different sort of animal, isn't she? And his main piece of news is that Sir Kevin has returned to the city and won't meet with Cersei. What do you think about that? That was left to kind of harkens back to him standing up to her and being like, I'm not going to be a part of this.
It makes a little sense too, because in fact, Qyburn might be putting himself in personal danger going to meet with her. Being an ally to Cersei at this moment might be a death sentence or at least a jail sentence.
Yeah, you know? It doesn't look good. That's for sure.
Like it's sort of known, at least kind of suspected in general, that Cersei did some of these things. Now she's arrested for it. It might not be politically appropriate for Kevin to visit her, even if he wanted to. He doesn't want to anyway. I don't think he likes her in the first place, but you can see how he might even justify. Although you do think maybe he would send a messenger. Maybe he did. Qyburn maybe is a messenger, you know.
By the way, this also shows that Cersei's been in there for a while. He'd gone all the way back to Casterly Rock, apparently. So Cersei's been in there long enough for Kevin to be summoned and to arrive, to take his place as Hand of King and to refuse to visit her and a few other things. So that shows, I guess it's maybe a similar amount of time that's happened in the Arya scenes.
Yeah, weeks maybe have passed.
Right, which kind of fits in some of the other things. You got, Jon has done some traveling. There's other things, and maybe the Sansa Theon scene, on the other hand, looks like it's just right immediately after the last episode, basically. So keeping track of time, though, is sort of a futile exercise in the show. The show definitely plays fast and loose with time, although not within its own plot lines. It plays fast and loose with regards to how the timeline of one plot line lines up with the others. It's pretty good about within one plot line about things being fairly consistent.
Yeah. I can also see, I think it's fair for if one plot line, I'm making this up, let's just say one plot line lasts a week and another plot line lasts 2 months. I can see them showing us splicing those together, a week's worth of time in one plot line being spread out and months worth of timeline, another one being crunched together per the episode's progressions. I think that's a reasonable thing. Yeah. It starts to get awkward if people cross paths from those plot lines, but I guess Littlefinger came from Winterfell to King's Landing.
His traveling is a bit hard to explain.
But I don't think too much about it. If I did, I might be disappointed. But
it's not really worth giving a lot of consideration to. We just all have to accept that they didn't want to put a lot of time into thinking about it. And honestly, it's not that important. It could be made to fit, and if it did, well, we wouldn't have noticed it probably. And that's really all that it would change.
I can also
they're not doing it's not that it's a little annoying, but I don't think it's
there's another one that's a little more glaring is Gilly's baby.
Yeah, we
not growing up.
Gilly's baby,
but that's one I also understand from a production standpoint. It's hard to make sure, because they don't film everything right in order. They're like, all right, here's the first day, film all the scenes in all the different locations. Next day, film all, they're filming at different scenes out of order in different locations, separated from different crews and on and on. And it's hard to have the right age baby at every scene along the way.
Also,
same thing with things like, haircuts and shaving. I'm a little more understanding of that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, with the baby thing also, I got to say, it's almost certainly a lot easier to have a baby than a toddler by like a mile.
Yeah.
Like having some little kid, you actually have to cast an actor. With a baby, you just get baby. Just baby. Any baby will do. You don't even have to have a real baby. You just need baby noises and, bassinet or whatever, not a bassinet, whatever, a bundle, you know.
Yeah.
And that's baby. There you go. It's just so much easier. If you have a toddler, then you have to. Who wants to work with toddlers on a movie set or on a TV show set? Like,
Yeah.
that sounds like a nightmare. I mean, I'm not.
They could use the
I
budget.
love kids, but everybody, parent, you know, I'm sure is with me on that one.
They could use all that budget that they would have to spend on dealing with extra kids and casting and making timelines fit up. They could just use all it instead to have a good action sequence in Dorm.
Touche. Well struck, Sean. Now, we also have, what else do we have about King's Landing? I think that's pretty much it for Cersei for now. We're kind of in a wait and see point. Like, how is this whole in jail thing going to resolve? Qyburn dropped a little hint there at the end as he was walking out. The project is still ongoing. I wonder if that's something he has.
Assume that's talking about Gregor. That's what my assumption there. But still, what's he going to do with Gregor? Is Gregor going to come in and kill all the faith militants?
Bust through the church and just take out everybody?
How does that? That's the same problem that, you know, when Tommen's like, I'll just go kill him. Well, they'll just kill Marjorie right after. They'll just kill Cersei too.
Yeah.
So
probably.
I guess maybe if it's a Frankenstein's monster charging through, they don't necessarily feel like that's an attack from the king and respond by killing the prisoners.
Yeah, just don't put a white cloak on him.
Yeah.
Remember where he came from. Put a Stark banner on him. Wrap him in direwolf clothing. Like, give him a direwolf and like a Son and Spear of House of Martells. And we're like, look, it's just some sort of Stark Dornish guy. I don't know. That's who did it. Like, we don't make monsters like that down here.
One of the thought, not so directly about Cersei, more about King's Landing in general, is let's just say these charges come to fruition. And even Qyburn warned, like, look, their belief is going to outweigh logic. Not to mention, you actually are guilty. Never mind. But even if you're just going to keep claiming you're not, and they have no real proof, they're still going to believe it and charge you and find you guilty. I hate to tell you, Cersei, but that's what's going to happen.
Just like Qyburn said, it's like the standard of proof the church has is not the same as what the crown is. And what he means by that is they don't need a lot of proof. They just hearsay is enough for them. And Qyburn pointing that out, like you said, well, you really did do it too. Yeah. And if all they need is hearsay and you actually are guilty, just denying it's not going to cut it.
Yeah. Well, beyond that, there's an implication beyond that. Like, So yeah, Cersei, you're in real trouble. But also, that means Tom is not the king. What? So now what? You know what I mean? What's going to happen next?
Yeah.
Is Kevin going to just get to keep being handed the king? I feel like there's such chaos and turmoil pending in King's Landing. I can't even guess how well Littlefinger's going to take advantage of it all.
Yeah, the man who loves chaos most. Maybe might be too chaotic even for him.
What I kind of expect is for Olenna and Littlefinger to start to, well, let me say, what I had been expecting is Olenna and Littlefinger to manipulate Tommen. But it seems like he's secluded himself and Kevin is here now. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if or how that, maybe it'll still happen. I don't know if Kevin will just blow off Olenna and Littlefinger. You know, I can imagine him blowing off Littlefinger. Imagine him having a similar negative opinion of him that Tywin and some other people have had, right? But maybe not Olenna. He might understand her importance and might respect her position and so on and so on. So, but he might also understand how precarious his position is. I wonder if he believes that Cersei's innocent or not. I wonder if he kind of knows it too.
What is in Kevin's mind? Yeah.
And I wonder if
Tywin was in denial, but that doesn't mean Kevin is.
Right.
Although Kevin might get most of his information from Tywin.
Right. But he
surely he has his own opinion.
Even if he wasn't in denial or was before whatever, at some point he might wake up to the truth.
Yes.
And at that point, does he continue trying to protect Cersei and the family name, or is he like cut his losses and tell the faith militant, okay, yeah, execute her. She's crazy. I don't know how we got mixed up in this. I'm sorry. Who do you want to be the king? You know, like, well, Lannister bows to your wishes. You know, I don't know which direction he'll go, or which direction Olenna will go. And I fear that Littlefinger might just get thrown in jail too. I feel like he needs to get out of King's Landing. I'm not sure, but that's kind of what I think. But
yeah, it's weird to be worried for Littlefinger, but it's in his best interest perhaps to at least be very careful where he treads right now. Yeah, you got this guy in charge, but I mean the High Sparrow is effectively in charge now. Tommen is powerless, and the High Sparrow seems to have all the cards. He's got hostages from both royal families.
Yeah.
both half the royal family. Like, that is an unprecedented amount of power. But he's not the type to leverage that in a traditional political way. He's just doing what his doctrine tells him to do, and he's proceeding with full zeal in doing so, and his followers are with him, it seems.
Interesting parallel. I just now thought of this. Tyrion's asking Dany, hey, how well did you do ruling with only the common people? How well is the High Sparrow going to do ruling with only, like, he kind of gave that threat to Olenna, like, at some point the many stop fearing the few, and then shit's going down, and it's gone down. But at some point, if you want to maintain your position ruling, you can't just have commoners riding in the streets against the rich people. You
really touched on something important there. I was saving that question because someone asked it for us. I thought it was a really good question to ask you. So you're too smart for your own good there. Well, I have that later in our notes, so we'll come back to it.
Okay.
It was a Watchner question, and I want to make sure that Watchner gets credit for asking the question. But yeah, that is a very good consideration there. The whole parallel of the power of the commoners, the power of the nobility, versus how a ruler has to interact with all that. And we're seeing the situation that Dany is in is starting to become the situation in King's Landing, but with a much different kind of ruler. Dany and the High Sparrow. Of course, the High Sparrow isn't actually nominated. He's just kind of the most powerful man in King's Landing. He isn't actually recognized as some, ruler over everybody. It just kind of worked out that way. Dany is actually, trying to be the queen or what have you. But I agree, that's a really, really interesting parallel. So here I just said we'll talk about it later, and I'm going on and on about it. So let's move on. Unless you have anything else for King's Landing, let us go to Winterfell. Ready for Winterfell?
Sure, yeah.
All right. Winterfell, Sansa and Theon. We were thinking maybe that she would use that little weapon thing on Theon. That seems a little less likely now. It could still happen if, he didn't want to tell her any more. He didn't want to give away any more than he did, although he gave away something huge. What did you think about that reveal?
I'm not sure. I thought it was interesting. My question is, does he run back to Ramsay and say, Ramsay, I'm so sorry, but I accidentally told Sansa about Brandon Rickon? That's kind of what I expect. Also, much like Sansa realizing that Jon is like head of the Night's Watch, like maybe there's a things for her to bring some kind of light into her life, but I don't know how they actually affect her position. It almost makes her position worse. You want Brandon Rickon alive means she's more expendable. Ramsay can't just kill her, So, and Ramsay does know that they're still alive. Like, if anything, I feel like she should be more afraid for her position than before.
Well, I'm not sure about that, because she should maybe be afraid for them, because Ramsay's still is going to want to have a child off of her and eliminate the other people. There's no other way for them to create a Bolton Stark type, which is what they want without Sansa. Rickon and Bran don't give them that possibility.
Unless Walda has a daughter and they marry and Bran.
That's true.
That's pretty far-fetched and down the road, but
that's true. That is something that I guess that is an avenue I hadn't considered. But yeah, that's obviously pretty chintzy with having a girl. It's surviving and
it's less what the Boltons want too. They would rather have the son carrying on the line.
Yeah, they still have to. They'd have to force Rickon into that, which is not something he might even go along with willingly. So I wonder, speaking of Rickon, whenever he makes another appearance, you wonder if they'll have to switch out actors or not on that kid. I think he's like 12 now. I really like Art Parkinson, but he's kind of like a lot of these characters. He's getting maybe too old to play his role.
Well, I assume time is passing in the show too. Like, I don't know for sure, but like
he's supposed to be like 6, but he's like, that's hard. He's hard to pull off. Like they could maybe push that he's like 7 or 8.
He was supposed to be 6 before. Or he's supposed to be 6 now.
I'm not sure. He was like 4 at the beginning of the books. So, and I think almost everyone's about 2 years older. Yeah, almost everyone's about 2 years older. So let's say he's about 6 at the beginning. So that would still make him only about 8 or 9. So maybe maybe a 12, 13-year-old could pull off 8 or 9. But that's kind of pushing it, because that's when you really start to, especially you can't predict. Like it has happening with Isaac Hempstead Wright, who is the actor playing Bran. He's just hit a growth spurt. He's really tall now.
He's the one I'm more concerned about having to recast.
Now they don't have to show his legs, so that might they've got a way around that. But with Rickon, I don't know, they have to do.
But it will still be a little weird to show Hodor carrying him around when he's almost as tall as Hodor. I guess Hodor's pretty tall.
He fit the role really. Bran fit the role really well. as when he was initially cast for it. But yeah, he's really kind of aging out of it.
I wonder if there's even knowledge in the world about how casting and contracts work, because he's not in this season at all. Doesn't seem far-fetched for him to not be in next season either.
I agree.
Recast as a different actor.
I agree. That could very much happen. I don't think they'll recast Hodor, though.
No, I doubt it.
Okay, so moving on from Sansa and Theon, that's kind of got to wait on that. That's a real wait-and-see situation. We don't know how she's going to react to the knowledge that her brother is still alive. It might give her new life. She's like, some of my family's alive after all. She certainly seemed to want to know where they were, and that was important to her. And in the behind the episode, Dan and David talked, I forget which one of them it was, talked about how to her it was energizing. That's specifically what they said. So take that with a grain of salt. The showrunners are saying that's what impact it had on her, that it was really important for her, that it was energizing, and it might give her some more will to live. And that's good. She needs a good reason, more of a reason to fight back against Ramsay than just her own self, I suppose. I don't suppose that. She has enough reason to fight back on her own. But if there wasn't enough reason, there certainly has a lot of reason now. She doesn't have as much reason to be in despair about her family all being dead, because they're not, unless Theon is lying. But we know he's not. I'm sorry, Reek.
Yeah.
Theon is not his name. Okay, so then we have the Bolton campaign chat.
I will say real quick, I do want to say that, because I can't remember this is a thought that I feel like I developed after the last episode. I can't remember for sure if I said it, but I feel like Reek is Reek now. I don't have, I could be wrong, but this is my current prediction. Theon's not helping Sansa. Theon is not Theon. Reek is Reek. Reek is not helping Sansa. I think he's gone. I think in the same way that we sort of saw Jon be given these opportunities to leave the wall and he kept refusing, I think we keep seeing Theon being given these opportunities to leave Ramsay, and he keeps refusing.
Interesting.
Maybe Jon will still leave the wall, but I feel like right now he's committed to the wall, and Reek is committed to Ramsay. I don't think he's coming around.
All right. See how that plays out. I think we might have maybe the only time Roose Bolton makes a joke in what I'm once again calling the Bolton campaign chat, where we have 4 Bolton general types, advisors. Well, one of them is a maester. That just makes sense. No, that's certainly not a complaint. We just don't know who they are. They don't get specific names. One of them is probably Steel Shanks Walton, who was one of Bolton's captains, and he was involved with the situation with Jaime and getting him returned and all that. So, not getting him returned, but he was at Harrenhal. And so they're probably carrying that same character over, even though his name hasn't been uttered aloud. Anyway, that's not important. So I love the joke he makes. They basically give the commander Bolton guy, whoever he is, talks about the reconnaissance on Stanish's position, says they have this many horsemen, and Bolton says, and how high can their horses jump? And he basically lays it out. He's like, look, we don't have to do a thing. The snow is doing all our work for us. Why should we lift a finger to go kill them? Snow's going to take care of them for us. Why should we waste a single man? But Ramsay disagrees, doesn't he? He has another plan. What do you think he's got in mind with just 20 men and himself running off to and he thought, I had a lot of different ideas. As he could sabotage their food supplies. They're doing food supplies, try to assassinate somebody, which opens up a lot of different possibilities. Infiltrate them, maybe try to join them. A lot of possibilities there.
I assume it's some sort of, a guerrilla mission, just some sort of attack on the outskirts in the middle of the night, take out a few men just to...
Hang on, just to be clear, I have, as you guys know, I have read the books. None of those things I suggested as possibilities are things from the book, because I will have to say that this is different from the books. This particular suggestion, whether it even happens or not, I don't know. So my questions were not. There's no hidden, sneakiness in that question. I'm trying to look at all that.
All your other questions have hidden sneakiness, though?
Yes. All of them.
Hidden squeakiness.
Hidden squeakiness. All my questions, yes.
Another prediction I've been making is that there's not going to be a big battle at Winterfell. That's another thought I've been having. I can't remember if
this does kind of steer it towards that.
Yeah.
Especially because we already had a big battle, and they don't typically have a budget for multiples.
But it was in episode 8, not 9.
Sneaky.
This past week, I've been kind of deciding in my mind that episode 9, what seems maybe would be this big battle at Winterfell that we've been sort of building up to, I don't think it's going to happen. I think that Melisandre and Selyse behind Davos and Stannis' back are going to sacrifice Shireen and do something. Outburst some spirit that kills Roose. That doesn't totally make sense because Ramsay's still there. Maybe they'll kill Ramsay. Roose will just bend the knee. In fact, I started thinking, why does there even need to be this battle? I'm surprised there's even this conflict between Roose. It seems like Roose and Stannis both should be like, hey, let's just not fight. And you can be king of the North and you can be king of Westeros and just keep moving south. And we don't have to have a battle. It almost seems odd to me that they even need to have a battle. It seems like both these men should be able to like come to some more peaceful conclusion, some more positive, cooperative conclusion. Especially, and I guess maybe word hasn't spread yet, but especially at this point, is Roose doing this for Cersei? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Maybe he doesn't know Cersei's in prison yet, but we just talked about how it seems like weeks have gone by, maybe even weeks gone by with the storm, the Ravens can't travel. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense it seems like for a million different reasons, there's not going to be this big battle at Winterfell. And so I thought, there's going to be some big battle in the north with the wildlings and zombies. Well, that just happened this episode. So now what will be the big thing next episode? Maybe it won't be a big epic battle, but it'll still be, exciting, momentous moment with Ramsay attacking in the middle of the night with some guerrilla force. And I can see in the midst of a storm and confusion, maybe they cut some section off and we have a battle of like, Roose and Ramsay and some henchmen and with Davos trying to defend Stannis. Maybe even somehow Brienne and Podrick get mixed up in this. I'm not sure.
It'd be interesting if Brienne and Podrick followed this detachment of men somehow and wound up there, and then she'd have this weird situation. Then she'd actually be near Stannis, and that would be wouldn't that be something? I kind of doubt she's going to leave Sansa's side at this point, but he might think she's with them for some reason or another. I don't know. I don't know why she'd get that idea, but it is possible.
Ramsay might do something crazy like take Sansa with him.
Whoa, that would be unusual. So there's a lot of possibilities. And from Roose's point of view, it seems like it's a good risk to let Ramsay take. He's got a child on the way. If something goes bad, something backfires, well, all he loses is 20 men and his crazy psychopath son. But if Ramsay proves himself, well, all the better. It's kind of what we call in the gambling world a free roll. Roose can't really lose, but he can win. Yeah,
I don't think that another thought that I have, and I think other people share, is that Roose doesn't care about Ramsay. Ramsay's a free roll, right? Like as soon as Ramsay's use is used up or craziness has gone too far, Roose, I guess he can't just straight up kill him, right? He doesn't want to be a kinslayer, but send him off to battle. There you go. Yeah, good job, Ramsay. Go ahead, go do some crazy mission.
And if Ramsay survives all this and keeps doing like a good job, quote unquote, then Bolton might have no trouble handing off, okay, you're the heir still, that's all good. And he dies. If Roose could just die one day and then he won't care, he'll be dead. So it's interesting. I think that's accurate. I think that Roose is just playing a wait and see kind of, I'm a ruthless waiter and seer type. If this works out, I'll capitalize. If it doesn't, well, I've got other plans and other opportunities. Now, of course, he is really coming down to it with the situation with Stannis. That's not something that's that's not a free roll. That is something that really he has to take care of one way or another. And he thinks the weather's going to do it. Well, he might be right, but first we're going to see what Ramsay's going to do, apparently. Now, a shout out to Javi Marcos of podcast Hielo y Fuego, a podcast of Ice and Fire in Spanish. For Spanish language listeners, there is something for you. If you have not heard of the podcast Hielo y Fuego, then you have that to look forward to. Check it out. He in particular wanted us to discuss this question of Stannis and Ramsay and what's going to happen, what Ramsay has in mind. At this point, I think we're just guessing. So more to come on that. Do you have any other thoughts on this situation, or shall we move on?
We can probably move on, I guess.
Okay, cool. Real quick as well, folks, on Amazon.com, this week's recommendation for Amazon.com is The Lands of Ice and Fire. We talk a lot about where things are happening, what's going on. The geography is really important. A famous historian whose name escapes me at this point once said that history is 90% geography. He may have been exaggerating a bit, but it's true. And George knows that. George understands that. And looking at the maps and understanding them well makes a lot of things more clear. It also has some juicy tidbits in it. The Tower of Joy, for example, is on the map, or one of the many maps that comes with the Lands of Ice and Fire. You get world maps, you get maps of Westeros, you get maps of the north, you get maps of all over the south, both from a high scale and from a more close-up view. Really good stuff, really fun. We got a lot of the maps hung around the house here. So let's go to the wall. We have basically a couple of short scenes here. It's really just, well, I guess it's just one scene. We have Ollie and we have Sam and Gilly. And it's pretty interesting, this conversation. It looks like there's some undertones here. We have Sam kind of telling Ollie about what Jon has to make an unpopular decision. And you see this, you see that Ollie is probably, I get the sense that he's just really hurt and confused. His best friends in the Watch are kind of buddying up to the people that killed his family. He doesn't really seem to have a distinction in his mind between good wildlings and bad wildlings. To him, they're just all wildlings. They're just a conglomerate. Sam was trying to get him to see it a different way, but did you get the feel? Do you think he made his point or no?
Just because he makes his point doesn't mean all his emotions change.
Right.
Ollie might have even understood it on some level anyway, but maybe he needs Sam to say it to him, needs someone to reinforce. You know, he's a pretty young kid. We got to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
A couple thoughts I've had. One, I was wondering at one point if Ollie ever came to understand that he killed Ygritte, who Ygritte was. It seemed like pretty public knowledge that Jon had an affair with a wildling. Does Ollie know that he killed the woman that Jon loved?
Well, he saw him. He would have seen him clutching her body afterwards. That would have had to. He would have been like, "Huh." If it he may not have fully understood, but also, you think that he has the information.
He would have. He might not have. There was a lot of chaos going on.
Yeah.
In fact, that was my complaints with that episode. Is Jon the only person that had someone who died that cares about? What if every time everyone like stops for a minute and has their moment of death and just mourning? Like, if there's a freaking battle, Jon, come on. People are dying left or right. You don't have time for this. Ollie might not have been able to just stand there with a bow and arrow in his hand watching Jon and Ygritte. Like, you know, he might have shot arrows at someone else, run away, someone's chasing after him. He might have seen it, but it's never been mentioned.
Yeah. Well, there's a parallel here too. What does Ollie think of Gilly? She's a wildling.
Yeah, yeah.
And Sam is in love with her.
And
he seems to be fairly tolerant of it, but that doesn't mean he brought Sam. He still, at least to this point, he's liked Sam. He thought enough of him to bring him.
He also might be more tolerant of Gilly, and in fact, many on the wall might be more tolerant of her because she's not. I've pointed this out before. She's not really a wildling.
She's like wildling by birth, but not by necessarily by culture.
She technically was born north of the wall, but she was pretty much a rape slave. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, so I don't know if it's, and I don't know how much everyone else understands that, but I think they should know. She came from Crasters. They know who Craster is. There might be an extra level of acceptance or tolerance of her as not being a wildling, you know. But
he might not want to test that too much, huh?
True. Well, those two guys certainly were, and maybe on some level, you know, like the rapists in some of these men on the wall, or, you know, is you know that, you know, I guess every bad person wasn't part of the mutiny and got killed off at Crasters. There's still maybe some level of badness left in people on the wall, you know.
What did you think of Sam's speech in general to him? Do you think it was effective, or I mean, you said that you're not sure. Even if he made his point, it may not have affected Ollie's emotional state.
He said the right things, I think, or mostly said most of the right things. But I don't know if it's not like Sam was like thinking about how to explain everything to Ollie. I finally got a chance, you know. It's kind of like suddenly thrust on him after being smashed in the head, you know, like. Losing his virginity. There's a lot in Sam's mind. You know, like he doesn't necessarily have all the answers for Ollie. My other thought, it's a little broader thought. I might ramble a little bit here, but I just started drawing these parallels between Soviet Union. You know what I mean? How
not yet.
Well, at a point, and it's a lot of this maybe it's a lot deeper than I could possibly explain. It's a few quick moments here, but they were sort of the evil empire. They were just bad guys. They're just generically, they're bad. Like in every movie, Soviets were bad guys. You know what I mean? But eventually their country was like falling apart, and kind of like we're even coming to the West for help. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And And it's not like every single person, millions and millions of people across thousands and thousands of miles of land all across Asia and Europe, they're all evil communists trying to kill everyone that's in America. You know what I mean?
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Right. Same thing with the wildlings.
Yeah.
They've just for generations been presented as the bad guys. And suddenly the bad guys need help. And we're kind of faced with the fact that they're not all bad guys. And that even the ones that are bad guys in some level are just fighting. We're not all good guys. We go kill them. We block them off. Who says just because you're on one side or the other of this wall, you're good or bad, you know? And again, rambling more, but just the thoughts that were going through my head.
I like that's a pretty good analogy.
I think it was Star Trek 6. Star Trek 6.
You're really going all over the place.
They were doing a similar thing with the Klingons. The Klingon Empire was just generally the bad guys. And they were all also kind of like wild, ferocious, honorable warriors or whatever, you know, against the more, you know, ostensibly, you know, I want to say, you know, the Federation or the whatever, the Westerosis were civilized, you know, versus these wild Klingons. But in the movie, the plot is like their planet, maybe their home planet or mine, something blew up, and it was like this devastating thing, and they were coming for help. Like, look, we know we've been your enemies forever, and we can't even get our own people to agree with this, but we need help, and we're coming to you for help. And Spock, who like had this personal vendetta against Klingons, his son was killed by them, right? So, and Spock at this point
spoiler alert.
Spock was like some sort of ambassador or senator or something, you know. Yeah. And he nominates Kirk to go visit the Klingons as a show of peace, to negotiate, And Klingons like, and Spock, in justifying this to the council and to Kirk, says only Nixon could go to China. China also, bad guys, you know, communist China. The U.S. was still recognizing the original Chinese government, not which is almost silly on a certain level. I can see it as a matter of principle, but you know, 1 billion people and their government were being ignored for the sake of this one little government because we just didn't respect. And Nixon was on that side. It was a conservative Republican stance to not recognize communist China. He gets elected president, he goes to China and recognizes them, and so on and so on. So here we are, John, head of the Night's Watch, fighting, dying, killing against wildlings,
the communist wildlings,
the bad guys that have been the enemies forever, and now they have to only. And Tormund's like, you have to go.
Tormund has a red beard. Communist.
Anyway, I know that's a lot. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how what I see here is that these people who just for generations have been the bad guys, and both in a kind of a abstract sense, but for Ollie and other people in a very real sense. But at this point, we're all in the same boat, and someone's got to negotiate this peace, and only Nixon can go to China. That's what I keep thinking about. John
John can go to Hardhome.
Yeah, there you go. So
it's true, and Tormund said that. He's like, "You're the only one that can make this happen. They're not going to make a deal with someone who isn't in charge, someone without authority." And from John's perspective, even if he wanted to send somebody else, who would possibly represent the interests that he has in mind? His plan is pretty radical. It's extremely radical. Integrating the Night's Watch with the wildlings is extremely unprecedented and just unthinkable to people on both sides. As we see in the actual Hardhome scene, there's some that are just like, nope, not going to ally with crows
at this juncture. Wouldn't be prudent.
Wouldn't be prudent. 1,000 points of ice. So, well, as far as the situation at the wall, it's really just a segue to the main scene because, of course, the wall is where the Night's Watch is, but where the Night's Watch's important business is happening is far away to the north and east. Again, if you had the Lands of Ice and Fire, you could look exactly to see where Hardhome was and have a sense of where it is in relation to everything else. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and move on to the epic Hardhome. We start with Tormund and Jon with the initial greeting. We have the Lord of Bones, a.k.a. Rattleshirt, who approaches Tormund and kind of acts as a de facto leader of types of sorts. He's kind of a big wig type. He's pretty high up in the esteem of most wildlings. Tormund knows this. And I think this is an important reminder that the wildlings do respect strength over everything else, and the way these two kind of settled things was by Tormund beating the crap out of the Lord of Bones and leaving it at that.
I took it to be more than beating the crap out of him. I think he killed him.
Yeah, I think he was dead.
Killed him.
I think he probably killed him, and if he didn't, well, nobody helped him while he was lying there bleeding to death. And then the whites came. So yeah, he's dead.
Yeah.
He might be a white now, but
in fact, prediction. We're gonna see him again as a zombie.
That'd be cool. A zombie decked out in bone armor. That's pretty he's got his own bones showing and the bones of someone else. That's pretty terrifying. That's the stuff of nightmares right there, I think. So that was in a sense, Tormund had the stronger argument, you might say, there. Yeah. His point was more forcibly made. And they listened to it. They kind of respected. Like, the crowd kind of parted for him, and they marched towards the hall and started chatting. They had their, I guess we'll call it a parlay. And they got to talking. We have this guy with the big axe, the Fen. That character was apparently called Loboda. And he refers to Jon as King Crow, which I think is a pretty interesting nickname to give him. It kind of denigrates him because the wildlings are not about kneeling. They didn't call Mance Rayder. They didn't say, what happened to King Mance? They didn't. What happened to our king? They're like, what happened to Mance?
Yeah. King Crow is kind of like High Sparrow.
Yeah, it is. You're right.
Lord
I
of
didn't think of
Turtles.
that. I did not think of that. That's hilarious. But they do mean that to be denigrating. They mean it's a negative connotation. And here's a funny thing. Every time I think my beard is getting somewhere, first of all, I just can't live up to this here. Sean's beard is just so much more epic than mine. But here we are at this wildling scene where there's just so many epic beards everywhere. I've never felt more like a boy with whiskers than seeing these guys with their amazing beards. Now, even more importantly, really importantly here, the band Mastodon appeared in this episode. The heavy metal band from Atlanta, which is our town. Sean's got a Mastodon shirt on representing here for those of you who aren't watching. Members Brent Hines, who already has a bunch of crazy tattoos and curly red hair and looks like a wildling already.
Acts like
perfectly,
one too.
Yeah, he does act like one. Every band in Atlanta has a Brent Hines story, and I've heard a lot of them because I've been going to metal shows in Atlanta for 15 years, and I've gotten to know some people in the business. And there's some crazy stories about this guy. He's amazing. Now, the drummer of the band Mastodon was also in this scene, and his name is pronounced Braun. So there you go. How about that? Braun, spelled with an A, but it's otherwise pronounced the same as Braun, as in Braun the Sellsword. So it's pretty cool. I didn't really see where they were. I just caught this from their fan page that they were in this show. So if you guys noticed specifically when they appeared on screen, give us the timestamp. I'd like to see that.
I believe they were in that confrontation we were talking about when what's his name? Shirt, rattle shirt.
Lord
he
of
was
Bones.
like in the background. They were in the background at that moment.
Okay,
and there might have been other parts too. I just saw a screenshot of that.
Right on. So we'll keep a lookout for that. If you guys already know, send us the timestamp.
And I want to point out they're a freaking awesome band. Even if they're not from Atlanta or not in Game of Thrones, they're just like
they did write a song called White Walker for the Game of Thrones mixtape as well. So they're pretty deep in the old fandom in their own way. Now, yeah, I've seen them 10 times probably. They are great. Okay, enough talk about Mastodon. Oh, and of course they fit in so well. There's Mastodons in the show, right?
That's right. Yes,
the elephants, the big woolly mammoths.
Maybe as the ships are sailing back, there'll be a white whale.
Right on. Okay, so this is a good point to remind people that there's generations and generations. We touched on. We were talking about the Wall. There's just generations and generations of hatred and mistrust between the Wildlings and the Night Watch. Tormund says this line, what we need is courage. The courage to make peace with men we've been killing for generations. The Night's Watch needs that same courage. They're both having to really rise to the occasion, but a lot of them don't see it that way. They see it as the exact opposite. They see it as cowardly. They see it as betrayal. They see it as treason. That's a tough sell, both for Night's Watch and for the Wildlings. Loboda himself says, what's going to happen? You're going to get on those ships. They're going to cut your throats. He doesn't trust them. He doesn't have, it's not just about, I refuse to fight with them. He's like, I don't believe any of this. I don't buy it. I don't believe the Night's Watch has good intentions here. Just like a lot of the Night's Watch are saying the same thing. They're like, well, we're going to let them in here. And what if they just start killing us? That's what Ollie said. It's basically the same thing. He's like, well, you're going to let them in. What happens if you let them in and they just slit all our throats. It's the same exact line. You're going to let them on their ships. They're just going to slit your throats and toss you into the sea. It's the exact same mistrust presented in a couple of different ways. And so what did you think about this parlay in general? And did you think it was realistic? Do you think it was just your thoughts in general on the scene?
I liked it. I really liked it. I feel like a lot of the types of conversations that were happening here are what I wish John and Mance had talked about before he got burned to death. You know, I also appreciate I appreciate Tormund more as a character. I will say that. I think his actions here have
John's trust in him is really justified, isn't it?
He's been both, I want to say, bold and logical. You know, he understands what's at stake. He's listening to what's going on, to what people are telling him. It'd be so easy for like, oh, fuck you, Jon Snow, and oh, want to fight. But he's like, he understands there's something more at stake. He maybe learned something from Mance, and he knows what a danger. He and Jon know what a danger it is to walk into Hardhome and all this opposition and all this distrust and everything else. So I want to give them credit for being wise and brave.
And that's a good point to bring up too, because as we just said earlier, as we started this section, the wildlings really do respect strength, and there's got to be a few of them at least that have to respect Jon for showing up with just 10 or 20 men amidst all these wildlings. That's no matter what they think of the Night's Watch or they think of Jon, they have to admit that that's a brave thing to do. That doesn't mean they're going to go with him or support him in any way, but grudging respect, I think, would even come from the ones who hated him the most, if they could get past their hatred to realize that, which some of them maybe didn't do. But a few of them certainly did. So when the time came, when the conversation was sort of settled and Loboda made his, rejection speech and basically walked out, a lot of people went with him.
Yeah.
And he's like, look, we're enemies. We're going to always be enemies. But when the time came, Loboda and Jon fought side by side.
Yeah, he's like, you and me, let's go. Let's get that dragon.
Let's get this dragon glass. So he realized it was kind of like when he's really in the thick of it, when his life is at stake, when he sees what's happening, when he's really confronted with the danger. I mean, let's be honest, it was epic as hell. And Loboda, just as if we're from the audience, it was epic to us. If you're trying to put yourselves in the shoes of this character inside the action, inside the scene, he's got to be like, even though he's kind of seen these things probably because he's a northerner and living really far.
Nah, he hasn't seen this.
He maybe hasn't seen this, exactly. He certainly didn't see the zombie lemming scene, that thing. He hasn't seen anything like that. So he got to be as overwhelmed. Maybe it sunk in at that moment. Of course, he dies a little bit later, so we don't get to see any more of him. Well, maybe we will. Maybe we'll see him as a zombie as well. He'll be a white. You never know. These guys could be pop up. Although he won't be carrying that badass axe of his. That thing shattered into a million pieces.
Yeah.
Now, so Jon says during the parlay there, he says, I'm not asking you to forget your dead. I'll never forget mine. And he was very emphatic about that. He got a little emotional just to show them that he's like, look, I am like you. I care about my people too. He's like, you won't fight for me or with me because of what my people did to yours. Well, I feel the same way, but I'm able to overcome that because of this common danger that we all face. Are you tough enough to do that? But he also spins it a different way. He also points out, I'm asking you to think about your children. And then it cuts to this wildling chieftainess, Carsey is her name. And as we find out shortly after, she does have children, so this really means something to her. At the first thing, it's just they're showing a woman when someone talks about children, and that's just kind of an obvious situation there. It's like, oh, they show the woman character when he's talking about think of the children. That's a standard device to do there, but it's also sensible. And since this character does have several children, it hits home a little harder a bit later, especially when it's presented so ominously. She's saying farewell to her children, and you're like, uh-oh. And then later when she's on screen with the really tragic music playing as her children are around, you're like, you don't want to be the focus of the camera during the tragic music for that long. That does not bode well. Yeah, as soon as that happened, it's like either something bad is happening to her children, or both. And yeah, it was both. It was the worst possible. So it does seem like at least half of the elders, as they're called, which is funny because a lot of them didn't look very elderly. Like that Carsey is young, but she was clearly strong personality.
I can imagine in general, wildlings might have a lower lifespan, a shorter lifespan. And I also did think a couple times how young Jon seemed in general to be a Lord Commander, but among these, he wasn't that much, like if he was among a bunch of Westerly Westerossi lords, it would have been a bunch of 50-year-olds and his 20-year-old. But among the wildlings, there's a bunch of 30-year-olds and a 20-year-old.
Yeah, yeah, there were some older folks there, but yeah, you're right. The leaders were more the strong people, and you're right. That's a good point. Their lifespan would be shorter.
The warriors who hadn't died yet versus the noblemen who own land,
Right. And of course, in the wildling situation, there are no noblemen who own land.
Right.
But there are the equivalents who are the chieftains and the great fighters, etc. So the actual invasion starts fairly soon after the parlay. This episode unusually had nearly half of its action, and it's mostly action, in one place and continuously. There wasn't back and forth to Hardhome. It was a bunch of scenes and then Hardhome the rest of the way, and it really just captured our attention. A lot of people are calling it the best action scene the series has done so far. Would you agree? Or
I think maybe I'm pretty nitpicky about action stuff, and I have a few complaints about this, but they're barely worth airing because I think it was overall good enough. I did like it. It was enough that first of all, I'm not sure, but it had to be one of the longer episodes. I think it was an hour and 10 minutes long. Most episodes are right at or maybe even under an hour.
That's right.
And still, when it ended, I was like, "That's it." I was still surprised. Like, that's all. Has it been an hour already? I was very caught up in it, and I saw it maybe 20, 30 minutes or so was that portion there, Hardhome. And I don't know if I wanted more from that action or if I wanted to cut back to what's going on with Danny or someone else. I'm not sure, but I definitely felt like the episode cut short. And then I realized, wait, that was an extra long episode. So I got to give him some credit.
Yeah, it was neat. And the other thing about it that bears mentioning is that all the other major battles, we saw them coming. We knew it was like, oh, next episode, big battle coming.
That's true.
Blackwater, yeah. We knew Blackwater. We didn't necessarily know it would be the whole episode. We didn't know that there would be an entire hour of one battle. We didn't necessarily see that, but we knew it was going to be a battle. We knew the battle was coming, unless something made the battle not happen. But we knew that was going to get resolved one way or another. Same thing with the battle at the wall, which just a little bit to the south there. That was telegraphed basically, and we knew it was coming because it was started the episode before. And we didn't know it would be the whole episode. We didn't know it would be an action-packed episode all the way through. But we weren't surprised by the fact that the battle was the focus of it. This was a total surprise. A lot of people, like you said, were expecting the epic battle scene, if there was one, to be in episode 9. And this was like, not only did we not see this battle coming, but we didn't see the participants. We were like, whoa, the trailers really made me think. I was fooled even more in a way, because I thought there would be more conflict between the wildlings and Jon. The way they did some of the trailers, it made it look like there'd be fighting amongst those people. They showed the fleeing and some of the fighting, and some of the people that Jon was fighting looked like wildlings. They were, but they were whites instead. Yeah. So that got me thinking it was a battle between the Watch and the wildlings, and I was confused. It's like, well, how could it be a battle if Jon's only going north with 20 men? Maybe some of the wildlings fought with him, and some of them, I was just wrapping my head around it. And then they're like, oh my God, it's the White Walkers with this massive army, and there's several White Walkers, and there's like White Walker commanders.
Yeah.
And holy crap, it was so amazing. So I think that was a big part of it, the surprise of it all. Like, there was build up to these other battles. This one was just like huge epic battle that no one was expecting.
Things kept getting bigger and bigger. And in the same way, I guess people who read the books were expecting the Red Wedding. I guess I was expecting something. I thought it was going to be something Joffrey's wedding. Yeah. I remembering back to that time period, because Melisandre just made her predictions, and I was thinking of characters I was worried about dying, and Martin will kill them off or whatever, and I thought that something was going to go down at King's Landing at Joffrey's wedding, and I was worried that Sansa might die, or characters I really liked might die. But then as the episode started, albeit Edmure's wedding, started to realize, there might, and it's about that moment with Caitlin, seeing the armor on
I said Reverend, I meant the twins, but yeah.
Yeah, seeing armor on Roose Bolton, I was like, ooh, the ominous, the music, ooh, something's about to go. I didn't think it was going to be as terrible and bloody as it was, but point is, Wait, what's the point? I just like talking about Game of Thrones. I remember at the Red Wedding, it kept escalating.
Yeah.
I remember as terrible as it was when they like stabbed Talisa. I was like, oh, they're gonna kill his unborn son. But then they like, kept stabbing. Like, oh God, they're just gonna kill her. And then they just started killing everyone. They just kept getting big. And then Caitlyn kills Walter Frey's wife. And I'm like, oh my God. I felt similar in this episode. I was like, oh man, we see that the music and the kind of like avalanche in the background, like, ooh, here comes,
yeah, it was like the audience reaction, like John and the wildlings are having the same reaction we are. They're like, whoa, this is holy crap, it's coming. There's this ice wave.
Yeah, I thought it was like an avalanche. Maybe the avalanche is being caused by zombies, maybe it's a coldness, something doom, some ominous presence was approaching, and there was concern, to say the least, right?
Yeah.
And so, but then it turned to like, suddenly a bunch of people outside were like killed somehow. So, it's magically, mystically, suddenly all these people outside are dead. Like, ooh, that's extra scary, right? Oh God, what's it going to be? He's like looking outside. We see the skeleton like, oh man, zombies are attacking. They're fighting left and right. And all of a sudden it's not just zombies, somehow they make those White Walkers so intimidating. They're so creepy.
Those
they're
eyes
so
are good. Yeah, the costumes are
they're
great.
Just stoned. They're just like, I can't decide if I want them to speak ever or not. A part of me wants to know what they're thinking. And
how intelligent are they?
Yeah. And I will say too, he communicated to John. The look in his face, the movement with his hands, that body language.
Come at me, bro.
Yeah, that was I could go on. Yeah, it was exciting. I felt like it built. The excitement built. And the action, again, I could nitpick a couple things, but it wasn't bad enough that I like turned off. A lot of times action is like, this is silly, but this was, I appreciate John was like winded and like coughing up blood. And, there was, people were dying left and right. And I felt like they were mostly following physics, except for the White Walkers, which are magical. And so, it was awesome.
Yeah, it was really just incredible. And there was, like you said, it also just escalated. It kept escalating. It kept getting bigger. You're like, oh my God, they're coming. And then there's like hands reaching through the fence and, they're coming at it from a lot of different angles. And you wonder if that's like foreshadowing. Is that like the force of so many zombies? Like, I can't imagine, it's, of course, a wooden wall is nothing like the wall, but is this a small scale of what it's going to look like at the actual wall? Because now they have this truly immense army. As many wildlings and peoples they've killed along the way as they've added to their army of the dead, so to speak. This is probably double, triple, quadruple what they already had. At least, I mean, I don't know. I'm just guesstimating out of nowhere, but I don't imagine that the White Walkers to this point have killed off an actually large percentage of the total wildling population. But this was a substantial chunk of all the wildlings. I'm not saying they took like half of them or anything, but because they're so spread out and disunited. But man, that's just a huge thing. And now their army is so big.
Here's one thought though.
Sure.
I still don't know. A couple thoughts actually.
Go ahead.
Let me write one down before I forget it. What are they gonna do to get across the wall? Like, it seemed like with 100,000 that the wildlings might be able to do it. When it was 100,000 to 100, they might be able to do it. And I'll even keep in mind of those 100,000, maybe less than half were actual able-bodied fighters. You know what I mean? So 50,000 versus 100. But they still had like some design to what they were doing. There was some amount of like plan with like ropes and chains onto the gate, and like, they had like catapults, arrows, they had weights climbing. The zombies, they seem pretty mindless. They might be determined and tough and indestructible, but they can't get up the wall, I don't think. It doesn't seem like they have enough coordination to build machines and
pile on top of each other. That would be a huge hill of zombies.
That'd be a big pile. I don't know if they, and even if they did, the people at the bottom can't get over still. I guess maybe they hand each other. But they're still facing the sides swinging down, boiling oil, everything else. I just don't see how they're gonna get across the wall. Although maybe some magical power that the White Walkers have, but it seems like if they have some magical power, I don't even know if they need an army of zombies. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm on top of all that. My thought is, what's their goal? What do they want? Is their goal to like sit on an iron throne? Is their goal to like kill all humans? I'm not sure what their intent is.
There's an old theory that they were, because you know that from history, maybe you don't know from history, the children of the forest were the original inhabitants of the area. And then the first men came, and there was lots of fighting between the children and the first men. And eventually they made a deal the first men would stop cutting down the werewoods, and they'd stop fighting each other, and they'd live in peace. And the first men kind of gradually adopted the religion of the children of the forest. But then the Andals came, and it kind of started up again. They were chopping down the trees again. And of course, before the Andals came, the timeline of ancient history is hard to be sure about. But basically, the story we're told is the others emerged pretty early on in male in the history of man, and there's a popular theory that the others / the White Walkers were created by the children of the forest as a way to fight against the onset of humankind, and then it kind of either got out of their hands, or maybe just like anything else, you can't expect the children to just be all of one mind about something. It could have been a faction of the children that some of them were like, okay, well, we have to accept this change. And some are like, no, we're gonna continue to fight mankind. The radicals in their group. Well, who knows which side would be considered the radicals? Yeah. But let's just say the radicals are the ones who are interested in killing humanity. So they created the others / the White Walkers, and this is. But it became out of their control. This is a theory. There's nothing. It
does make sense because that is often, especially when you have more mystical villains in a show. I find it almost silly sometimes. Like some demon from another dimension is coming to Earth to kill Joe Schmo. Like, what does this demon from another dimension care about Joe Schmo or anyone on Earth? What difference does it make to him? Creatures of such power from other dimensions, like what could they want? What do they want? Chocolate? You know what I mean? Like, what are you going after? What do they
There is no chocolate in Westeros. They're come to the wrong place.
Are they what is motivating them, and more specifically, what's motivating them right now? Why now, not next year or last year?
Well, they had to wait till all the time there was no dragons, and they had to wait till everyone was fighting each other. Finally, it happened. No, I'm just saying that. I don't know about their timing. It could just be the comet and the way that magical seasons. There's something to be. Yeah. There's suggestions that magic is like a tidal thing, that it kind of recedes and wanes and comes back, and so that could be related to that. Well, I'm making these hand gestures, and it could be related to that, but it might not be. The other thing that fits really well, though, is if this aspect with the children of the forest theory is that they live underground. So like this intense cold above, ground that affects everything they could shelter from, whereas mankind could not necessarily. So that fits in it with it well too. It fits in it's something that would take out everybody but them. So whether or not they're responsible for it, it sure was convenient.
Yeah,
in that sense.
Those are good theories, and they make my mind more at ease with it. I'm open to other theories, though, and maybe they will show us. I kind of hope that they will show us, but
there's an inherent problem with theorizing about the supernatural. It could it isn't bound by rules.
Yeah,
there's only only so much logic we can apply to it.
I do appreciate the mysterious nature of these creatures, but at a certain level, I am more invested when I understand their goals. Does that make sense?
Right.
And maybe they're just blindly, madly killing all humans. But if that's the case, it takes something away. Because I felt like that guy who I'm kind of guessing we'll talk about this a little bit. Because they actually referred to him as the Night's King. He seemed to have, I'm going to say, personality.
Mm-hmm.
He seemed to recognize Jon as a leader, maybe even as a threat, and it wanted to impose himself, wanted to send his own threat. He didn't seem to just be blindly killing everyone. He seemed to be observing and understanding and planning. And if that's the case,
seemed to be a
what is his plan? Yeah. They also seem to be
ranks. He was like the king, and they had some other guys on horses. There was 4 of them. It was someone made the joke, the 4 horsemen of the ice apocalypse.
Yeah, that's even further added to because in the the behind the scenes bit, I don't remember, inside the episode or whatever they call it, he even referred to them as his lieutenants, the Night's King and his lieutenants. And we remember from the earlier scene, there seemed to be a sort of a ceremony. They were standing around,
baby,
structure and da. So it makes me believe there must be some motivation.
They have some sort of civilization,
right?
Yeah.
They're not just like mindlessly killing all humans.
Well, there's also like a sort of an ice castle thing in the background.
Yeah.
Well, up from season 4.
Maybe their goal is to kill all humans, but I'm just kind of interested in knowing: is that their goal? Is there some other goal? Is there any potential for peace talks or compromise, or is it enough for them to? Maybe they just, for example, maybe they just want to get rid of all humans north of the wall, and maybe Jon takes all the wildlings on the other side of the wall. The White Walkers on is like there. And stay out. You know what I mean? Or are they motivated to get past the wall? And if they are motivated to get past the wall, how in the world are they going to do it?
There's a big question going around. This is a question I've had for a long time about how that all works. Like, why would you build a huge wall of ice to keep out beings who seem to be full of ice magic?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? It seems almost backwards. There's a more crackpot theory out there that suggests that the White Walkers built the wall initially.
Maybe.
And that humans took it over. I don't know. There's not a lot to back that theory up, but it is weird.
Together in some way. Like, I don't know how much we want to talk about this, but isn't the Night's King?
He used to be
a Lord Commander of the Night's Watch.
Supposedly,
like,
that's a legend. Yeah,
thousands of years ago, some way back.
He was supposedly the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, and Jon is the 998th or 999th.
Okay, so yeah,
a long time ago. Yes.
By the way, I can imagine one reason you make it out of ice, especially as time passes and the magical White Walkers aren't so much the threat, because it's been built up over time, right?
Right.
It's a material that you have that's more.
That line has even been used in the book, in the show. They're like, you don't build out 7,000 or a 700-foot wall of ice to keep people out, keep out savages and skins. Something along those lines is said, and people are like, well, yeah, good point.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Who knows what the reasonings of ancestors past were for how and why they did it all.
It's clear that these White Walkers have powers. Like you said, they have magic. They, like they froze a bunch of people. They can raise the dead. They had the zombie lemmings thing happen. That was so epic.
They can turn themselves into shards of ice with the stroke of a sword.
That's actually a good segue to something we should talk about. What did you think of that? Jon's sword.
I immediately want to know, how many other swords are there? What other houses? How are there? I did a little research. I actually had to do some research. I wanted to know, like, are there like 7 swords or 700 swords? You know, and I think we got a number around 200 weapons of different types that are scattered around, may or may not be accounted for. And because I think you need to get them all together. Everyone who has a Valyrian steel sword needs to come to the wall. And I can imagine that might be as tough as Mance Rayder getting all the wildlings to unite, as getting everyone who has a sword. They
have to be threatened directly to really be like Laboda there. He's like, no, I'm not doing that until then the White Walker's right in his face. He's like, all right, we're together. Might be too late. But
and even if they want to, let's just say that some Dornish soldier has a Valyrian steel spear.
Yeah, why would someone in Dorne be worried about what's going on way up there?
Even if he's worried, it'll take him months to get there, right? It's a huge, long journey to get up there. You can't just like, all right, I'll be right there. It's even on ship, it's going to be weeks. I don't know how long they had till they get to the wall, and I still don't see how they're going to get past the wall, but maybe some kind of magic.
Now, so that's a good question. Some of the swords that we've seen in the show for sure is obviously Ned's sword, Ice, which was
that's
split into two swords now. One of them is Widow's Wail and one is Oathkeeper. We don't really know. Widow's Wail is somewhere in King's Landing.
That was another question I had. Yeah, what happened to? Because it was given to Joffrey on his wedding. Yeah. So once he dies, I just sort of assume it goes to Tommen.
It would stay in the
family, I also assume
yeah.
Tom's not just carrying it around on his hip all the time. I assume it's safe
somewhere in King's Landing.
Maybe given to. I even wonder if maybe Meryn Trant's carrying it around, but I decided against that because it's like it was kind of a small sword, right? And I think it would look a little silly for Meryn Trant.
Yeah.
But I also can imagine some big, strong warrior with this little sword. Like, you might think it's silly. Well, I'm going to kill you with a Valyrian steel blade. I don't care how little it is.
And of course, Brienne has one, and she's right there.
She's
well, not right there, but she's closer than probably any other Valyrian steel blade besides Jon's.
Sam's dad has one?
Sam's dad does have one. That's right. They brought that up. And I don't remember when that was brought up. I guess it was brought up when Sam was talking about his father with Stannis, but it doesn't really matter when it was brought up. It was definitely brought up. And there are a few others out there. There were the one that you mentioned that you knew about that was lost by Tyrion's ancestor.
Yeah, there was
that Tyrion's uncle was trying to go find.
In the same place where Tyrion and Jorah went through. And
right, Bright Roar. Which, by the way, I wondered, thinking back on that scene, I forgot to bring this up. Why didn't Tyrion mention that he saw Drogon? Or he didn't know it was Drogon, but he didn't mention that he saw the dragon at all.
He didn't say
I guess they're saving that. Just like Tyrion didn't mention that he knew G.R. Mormont to Jorah. They're saving that.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be next episode. Anyway, we're not talking about that right now. But so that's really, really fascinating. This whole situation where we learn that Valyrian steel has this special power, and the White Walker was surprised by it too. Their blades clash, and he's just like, "Whoa!" And then they kind of their eyes meet, and meanwhile the Night King is watching this happen. He sees that. He's like, he has a weapon that matters. That might be why he took note of Jon rather than him being a leader. Might have been just because he's that. But he also is wearing the Night's Watch garb, which has to stand out.
Yeah, and went to go to the place where the other White Walker was, like charged in.
Yeah, he killed another White Walker. He's the only one who killed a White Walker there. So that singles him for a lot of reasons. The blade, he might have even sensed the blade, like maybe it was like
like the Force or
the Force, the ice. And so I guess Jon is now the second person to have slain a White Walker on the show. I also thought it was interesting that they had the giant kind of looking at the dragon glass up close.
Yeah, he was very intrigued by it. Yeah.
That giant has a name, by the way. His name is 1-1.
Okay.
Yeah, not the number, but just WUN.
Not the loser. The 1-1.
So I liked his action in the fighting too. A lot of times, some of the giant fighting scenes have been a little silly, but this was cool. Like he's just fighting with his hands and his fists, stomping on things.
50 men. I mean,
his flaming log was a nice touch. That was cool. And so I'm glad to see him survive and walk out to the ships, I suppose. He had to start swimming.
I don't even know if he can get on a ship.
I think he probably can, but maybe not.
Big ship, I don't know.
So they just got to be careful. Like, all right, just everybody stand on this side of the ship while he's climbing on to keep the weight on this side. But yeah, it was really sad. There were a lot of moments during the battle too, like Karsti, that wildling chieftain who dies.
Yeah,
she just couldn't.
I was hoping she'd be a new character.
But a lot of people were sorry to see her go. Some people were like instantly like, she's my new crush, but now she's gone. And she just couldn't bring herself. Like
all the others.
She couldn't bring herself to kill the children, her own children, and the other children, even though they were undead. She was too much for her, and very sad. Okay, so a couple of one or two questions here. We don't have a lot of time, as we predicted. We don't have a lot of time left, and we had so much to talk about. So let's focus on the question that I cut you off on earlier. The watcher's name is Travis Raker, and he wants to know: might Dany and the High Sparrow work together, given that he wants to hold people accountable, and she's not guilty of these particular sins that all these other nobility are guilty of? Probably. Not that he knows of, anyway. And they're both very pro-commoner. She's like all about freeing people from bondage and supporting that. So it's an interesting question. So now you can go ahead and revisit your thoughts on this whole idea.
More specific to that question, I would point out Dany seems pretty much to plan on committing adultery. So that's one thought.
That's true. It remains to be seen what kind of a sin adultery is in their eyes. I'm sure they're not happy with it. They're definitely about monogamy. So,
and I don't see Dany wanting to persecute homosexuals, but we haven't really seen any of that one with the other. But I just assume that's not part of her character.
I doubt she'd care.
I will say a thought I've had is I don't think the High Sparrow is going to cooperate with Stannis and the Red Witch, right? Because that was another thought I did have is like I feel like they shouldn't fight. I feel like Stannis and Roose have more to gain by allying than fighting. But even still, like with all the houses, like the Lannisters are pretty much just out of it, I feel like. And I can imagine Dorne just I don't know what religion do they have in Dorne?
They follow the seven. Yeah,
okay,
they worship the seven.
So I can imagine Dorne just being like, yeah, it's the High Sparrow. Yeah, you're better than Lannisters, whoever. We don't care. We're doing our own thing down here. And the Starks aren't. I'm just trying to imagine how everyone's going to fall in line at the point if the church announces, all right, Tom is a bastard. He's not the real king. We got to figure out who the king is. For now, the High Sparrow is going to be. Stannis like, wait, it's me. I'm the king over here. And Roose is like, yeah, I'll bend the knee to him. And the Tyrells is like, yeah, he's better than freaking Lannisters. And everyone's like, okay, yeah, Stannis, we'll accept you as king. We'll bend the knee. And High Sparrow's gonna be like, not with that Red Witch, you're not. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think they're just gonna welcome Stannis into King's Landing.
That's a big no-no, following another religion. Yeah, that's
so. I wonder, who the High Sparrow, if he has any plan of naming a new king, who it will be, what person is going to rise to that, and how Stannis will take that, or how they would accept Stannis. That seems more short-term of a thing to be predicting than Dany, But maybe Dany will jump into dragons, fly over tomorrow. Tyrion like, all right, if we want to take Westeros, let's go now while they're being attacked by zombies. We need to save them, But I still think that's a season away at least.
Yeah.
I think they have stuff in common, but I don't know. I have a feeling by the time Dany gets there, the High Sparrow's not going to be there anymore.
Something to look about. That's a very distinct possibility and worthy consideration. But if you look at the way things are coming apart at a high level, the Wall is not necessarily in turmoil, but it's potentially set up to be in turmoil because of obviously the invasion, but also from within because of these disputes about joining with the wildlings.
Yeah.
Same thing from the wildlings' perspective. Although I'm sure a lot of them are more sold on the idea now that they've seen the White Walker assault. The Iron Throne is in flux right now. The North is in flux right now with two major combatants going at it. Dorne is not in flux, but there's certainly a situation going on there. The Tyrells are married in with the Lannister situation, the Baratheon situation, and the Riverlands was pretty much destroyed during the war. The Vale is still in pretty good shape. The Vale hasn't been touched by the war at all. But other than the Vale and maybe some of the Stormlands and partially Dorne, it's pretty bad as far as unity and things being settled to the point where humanity can kind of come together. So you do wonder about the intelligence of the White Walkers and whether they had some sort of inkling of how turbulent the realm is, because their timing is quite good. It's quite good. And you're right, that you can't just say, oh, it's just the timing. I wouldn't throw that away lightly. I would consider, there might be more to it. I'm not sure. So it's a very interesting situation. Did you have any more on that question? Did you have any more thoughts on Dany and the High Sparrow, or is that just kind of a more wait and see? Like you said, he might not even be there.
Something occurred to me, a parallel there, yeah.
Yeah. It could definitely be something, someone else could be in place by them. But it's hard to say who. Like maybe Tommen gets back a hold of things, but who else is there? Like you said, Stannis, maybe, but things aren't looking great for Stannis right now either, are they? So it's really hard to say. Like Dany's really the only viable candidate, but she's so far away and she's got her own things
I'm
going
thinking
on.
like, let's say they have they're not planning on having a trial for Cersei 3 years from now. Right? It's probably going to be 3 weeks or maybe 3 days, maybe 3 whole months. I don't know. After that trial, let's say everything goes the way the High Sparrow wants or thinks or expects or whatever. Cersei's guilty, doesn't confess, chop off her head. Tommen is a bastard. He's not the real king. And so now, who's the king? What's the High Sparrow just going to be like, okay, there, we punished all the bad people. Go back to work now. Nothing to see here. Move along, move along. Like, I still think things will fall apart. Even his position as head of the Faith Militant or whatever might not last if just stability. On some level, King's Landing is depending on food coming from the Tyrells. And Lynn's like, screw this. I'm not sending any more food. There'll be riots in the street, and they can riot against all the nobles, kill them, and not have any food. And then what's the High Sparrow going to do? So
that would be a conundrum.
Maybe the Seven Kingdoms just won't be United Kingdom anymore. Maybe there will be no Iron Throne, but that's still... You're
not alone with that prediction. There's a lot of people that think the series will end that way, that by the end, of course, this is something that's so far ahead that no one can really be sure, but you're not the first one to make that suggestion. It's a good idea. I think it's very possible that there may not be a united Iron Throne by the end. There may be some sort of completely new division of kingdoms, or it could be more united than it was in the first place. It's hard to say. But I like that theory. I think it's very, very reasonable. Okay. We'll still have a little bit of time for the trailer discussion. Let's do some credits here. Give some thanks where thanks are due. Very important thing for us to do almost as often as possible. Occasionally we have to skip the credits for time reasons. Patreon thanks. Thanks to Hand of the King and First Lord Cash Craig, a.k.a. Vaxis, on the History of Westeros forums. Our Warden of the North is Lord Parker, the bastard of Starkville and breaker of the first stone. Master of Coin and First Counselor is Lord Robert Jacobs. Our Master of Whispers is Lord James the Scholar. Grand Maester Itai wears the jeweled collar of many metals. Rosie the Clever is our Master of Laws. And Lord James Tuttle is our Master of Ships. Our Night's Watch is commanded by George the Golden, and our Kingsguard is commanded by Lord Commander Shepard. Sir Troy the Steady swings the Valyrian steel blade Fate as the History of Westeros King's Justice. Lady Direliz of Castle Naki is the Alpha Patron. Lord Nathan of the Fire Fort and Dan of the Red Mountains, Lord of Great Bell and Breaker of the Second Stone, round out our list of lordly lords. Remember that you can also do a regular straight PayPal donation through historyofwesteros.com, and that will get you early access to upcoming episodes. Nothing to do with the TV show, of course, because we release those as soon as we can. But regular History of Westeros episodes, you can get those a little bit earlier by doing a regular donation. Also, that applies to Patreon people. There are many other benefits to be had on Patreon, so check it out, www.patreon.com/historyofwesteros. And a reminder, folks, don't forget that we're doing next week's episode live at 4:30 on Monday, 4:30 Eastern Daylight Time. So look out for the links for that and be prepared to tune in and watch us live. It's going to be a lot of fun. So if you don't want to hear anything about the trailer discussion, adios to you, and we will see you either next week or in the Book to Show episode, depending on your own level of spoiler tolerance. So let's talk about the trailers real quick. One of the first things we see is we see Jon and Tormund and One and others approaching the wall, and Alistair's looking down on them like he might not want to let them in. That would be a real kick in the pants, wouldn't it, if Jon fights his way out of that situation only to be abandoned right in front of the wall? Any thoughts on that? Also, the other thing that's happening in that scene that's very apparent is there's a lot of snow. It is coming down heavy.
Yeah, I think he'll let him in. I can imagine there might be some sort of like resistance or negotiating or something, but I have a hard time believing Alistair would just not let them in.
Yeah. It's worthy of consideration, but I tend to agree that he'll probably let them in, but it might just be a trick of the trailer. But yeah, that would be interesting if Jon had to basically he'd have to stay on that side of the wall. He'd have to find shelter, and he wouldn't be able to stay where they were. They wouldn't be able to stay put. They'd have to go somewhere. They'd have to head east or head west, maybe try to go around the wall. I don't know what they'd do if that were the case. I doubt they'd attack the wall. Jon's like, all right, now we're attacking the wall. They're not letting us in. Let's just. If Mance couldn't do it, I don't know that this ragtag group probably couldn't handle it. Now, Doran Martell appears in the trailer as well, and what he's saying is, "You can swear your allegiance to me, or you can die." Who's he talking to?
He's talking to
probably not Jaime. That seems unreasonable for him to expect Jaime Lannister to swear his allegiance to him. But it could be Bronn. It could be the Sand Snakes. Probably not. Probably nobody else.
I bet it's Ilaria.
Ilaria, the Sand Snake. Yeah, that seems like a good guess. Now, Sir Pohi, another watcher, suggests that Bronn's thoughts on Dorne in general. How Bronn seemed to like Dorne. He talked about how he liked. He was like, yeah, that's an argument for him being the one to take it.
Yeah,
and like maybe because we know what Jaime's offer was. He's like, I'll give you a bigger castle and a better woman. Dorne could probably top that.
Yeah,
he could probably offer him an even bigger castle. And I don't know. I don't suppose he's going to offer Tyene, but if he did, that might work. He might be like, her, yeah, all right,
deal.
We've already seen that he's quite entranced by her, so that could work. Although he might be a little worried about repeated poisonings, but I don't think Bronn's really worried about that. He's not afraid of such things. So I think that's really potentially quite interesting. Now we also see Arya and Jaqen progressing towards this potential murder of the insurance man. They're talking about it a little more, and there seems to be a few scenes along those lines. I'm not sure there's much to predict there. Like it could go wrong, it could go right. But either way, we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
but
it probably won't stop the general storyline for Arya either.
Right,
so.
But it is nice to know that we're going to have more of Arya next episode, because a lot of times she takes an episode off. She hasn't been in that many episodes total season. They've done it. They've focused on her a lot when she's in the episode, but most of the episodes she isn't in. So I expect that we'll get some good Arya action next episode. We also have some scenes in the north. We have potential clues as to what happens with Ramsay's little commando raid, assuming that's what it is. We see Melisandre looking very concerned. We see tents in the snow burning, which certainly lends itself to the whole sabotage notion. We have Davos and Stannis together, and we have Stannis' quote saying, "If a man knows what his destiny is, he must fulfill it."
Maybe Ramsay will burn Shireen. Maybe
Oh,
Melisandre
my
won't even
goodness.
get a chance. I don't know
Poor
if that'll
Shireen.
count for the sake of power.
Constantly in danger, Shireen.
Yeah.
Jeez. Then we have Then we have also the big pit scene. Daznak's huge pit. That looks like it's gonna be pretty epic. Danny stand up there waiting for you. And Danny stands up and like commences it, and then everybody rises, and you get the Targaryen banners everywhere. That looks like it's gonna be pretty epic. Something to look forward to there. So it looks like there'll be plenty more epicness for the rest of the season here. There's only 2 episodes left. Should be a lot of action. Should be a lot of plot lines maybe coming to a close or resetting. Anything you're most excited for? Or is it hard to say?
Yeah, it's too hard to just
say. Yeah. Who knows? Okay, folks, that is our show. We will see you all next week. Thank you, everyone who sent us questions and support of all kinds, whether it's words of encouragement or financial support. We appreciate it all, and we look forward to continuing covering the rest of the season with you, even though it's pretty short. So, Valar Morghulis, until next time.